What's up, internet friends? Welcome back to the Sports is Fun podcast, episode 3. My name is Marty. I'm your host. Happy to be here. Here we go. How's your week been? There's a lot of news, guys and gals. Listen to that intro music. Let it ride out. So I got a good show for you today. I'm going to talk to a very good friend of mine that I met on Leafs Twitter, and I'll introduce that in a minute. But first, we should talk about five things that are going on in the sports world that make sports so fun. Of course, you're probably thinking, well, now that we're here talking about the podcast, why is it called Sports is Fun? Because sports is fun. Think about it. Sports is just fun. That's all it is. It's for fun and for entertainment only. And that's why we love it, right? Here's the 5 things that I'm thinking about and talking about. And you can add me. Don't forget to add me on Twitter, TML Fan and Van. Of course, follow the podcast, please. Subscribe, because we're going to have lots of cool guests coming up. This podcast is brought to you by Leafs Updates. And you can follow Leafs Updates on Twitter and on Instagram. And I'll post that in the comments. So, first up, Ron MacLean. Let's talk about Hockey Night in Canada's lineup. There are some big rumors going around about Ronnie MacLean. And my opinion on Ron is, here we go. This is maybe a little bit controversial, but to talk about Ron, of course, it brings up Coach's Corner always. Ron MacLean needs to gracefully go off into the pastures of retirement. And I'll tell you why. It's time to move on. It's time to bring on guys like David Amber. It's time to bring on guys like Kevin Bieksa and Elliot Friedman. And it's time to move on from the old guard of Canadian hockey. It's time to stop talking about nostalgia, and it's time to start just talking about the game of hockey that we love and the details and the X's and O's. And that's what makes hockey fun. Learning about the sport, not the nostalgia piece that Ron MacLean always kind of draws on. And hey, listen, I was the biggest fan of Ron growing up. In fact, I was a fan of Don and Ron. But it's time to move on. And the fact that he lost the Rogers Hometown Hockey series, you know, that movie, we saw that movie over and over on Sundays, and it was done. He's a good journalist, but his time is over, and I'm glad to see him go. I wish him all the best, but yeah, I'm done with that. Let's move on. He is a dinosaur now, isn't he, right? And let's be honest, all his cliches and old pieces, they're kind of puff pieces, right? They're not talking about the game, in my opinion. You're not learning about the minutia of hockey. And that's what I want to know about. I want to know about new analytics, the numbers. I want to learn about the micro stats. I want to learn about where you can find great players to play the game of hockey. Anyway, so Ron MacLean, see you later. Sayonara, Ron. Next up, number 2, the Blue Jays slump. Wow, they had a slump here in the last 10, and I'm glad to see they got a win tonight. You know, I don't know what their season outcome is going to be, if they can get to the 98, 99, 97 win mark that, you know, they were slated to early on in the season. 4-6 in their last 10. It's nice to get a win now. They've got a lot of injuries. I'm just happy to see them win after all of the things that have gone on in that clubhouse in the last week or so. They've had some strings of injuries, and their first base coach, some terrible news from the Blue Jays locker room. I'm glad to see them start winning. Hopefully this is the sign of good things to come. And of course, I'm always happy to see Adam Simber have a good outing. I love that guy. He's got such a great pitch and sidearm pitchers. I've always liked sidearm guys. I don't know why. Tell me what you think. So number 3, the draft. Oh, the draft is probably by the time you listen to this podcast, it will have happened. But I'll do a post-draft. I have some plans with some upcoming guests, so we'll talk about the draft in detail. But I'm thinking that there could be some really interesting things happening. Like, as an example, Rasmus Sandin on the Leafs. Could there be an offer sheet this week? Could there be some movement with the second-round pick in New Jersey? Could Ottawa swing a trade for the 7th-round pick? Will Vancouver tank down all the way with trading JT Miller and next year Jimmy Rutherford, trying to get a really great foundational player like Connor Bedard, which is what I think they should do, by the way. All you folks out here on the West Coast with me, of course, would maybe disagree, but I think that the Vancouver Canucks need to build from within and keep building, and that's going to start with a player like Connor Bedard. I don't think they have a number 1 center personally, but I think they've got a good team. And then some other stuff happening. Naz Kadri, is he going to sign in Seattle or is he going to go to Detroit? Is he going to sign in Boston? I don't friggin' think so. But we'll see. So there's a lot of compelling storylines. Shane Wright, will he go first? I think he will. Honestly, I think he might go first, but maybe not to Montreal, because Montreal could trade down. Maybe they'll trade down and get two first-rounders in the top 10 and a late first, and then end up with a lot of really compelling and interesting prospects that they can build a team moving forward. I always like to see the Montreal Canadiens competing in our division, because strangely enough, you can't have Batman without Joker, and you can't have Joker without Batman. It's just not as fun. So you need that villain. And the Montreal Canadiens are the perfect villain, in my opinion. And I'm not a fan of them, but I'm a fan of some of their players. I think Carey Price is a fantastic hockey player playing for Team Canada. Shea Weber as well. Obviously, he doesn't play for there anymore. He's never going to play again. Let's be honest. He's retired. But my point is that I'm happy to see the Montreal Canadiens compete. And the Vancouver Canucks compete too. I want them to compete. I'm out here on the West Coast, so I want them to be competitive. Vancouver, when they're good, they fill bars. My friends who play music are able to make money. That money filters into the music community and supports the arts, which I, of course, as you know, am a huge supporter of. So that's what we want in Canada. We want good Canadian teams. We want every Canadian team to win. In fact, the draft weekend brings up another point I made with a friend today. You're gonna probably bury me in the comments on this one, but I think that now more than ever, I don't care who wins the cup as long as it's a Canadian team. I am so friggin' sick and tired of the Gary Bettman's NHL. I want a Canadian team to win and tear down Gary's rule. He's the tyrannical ruler of the NHL with his bullshit salary cap and his bullshit University Stadium Arizona Coyotes. Let's change the storyline and let's win a cup up here in Canada where the game belongs, where the stronghold is. Let's bring Arizona back to Quebec City. That's my opinion. And hopefully this draft, moving past the COVID shutdowns and the COVID lockdowns and the flat salary cap, hopefully this means that this is moving towards new beginnings. So the draft is always new beginnings for all hockey teams, including some of the teams up here like Ottawa, Montreal, and Vancouver. And of course, lots of storylines with Toronto. Are they going to trade Kerfoot? Are they going to trade Hall? Are they going to trade Mrazek? Is Muzzin out? Dubas made some interesting comments today in a press conference. I don't know what he's going to do, but we'll see, won't we? Number 4 in 5 things. Haley Wickenheiser is, in my opinion, is she the greatest hockey player in the modern era? Think about it. Does she have, 3 gold medals with Canada? She played against men in Finland. She is the greatest female hockey player of all time, and now she's a doctor, and now she's been promoted to assistant general manager of the Toronto Maple Leafs. It's just absolutely wonderful to see women like Haley grow the game and give a different perspective. Certainly in the management room of the Toronto Maple Leafs, giving a different perspective in that office, which is really important to me because a big my perspective on hockey is that to build a successful hockey team, you have to look at your biases and break through those biases. And sometimes the bias is as simple as you're a dude and you grew up thinking only players who were 6'5" and up could be successful in the NHL, and that's how you built a championship team. Well, in my personal opinion, that's not how a hockey team is built anymore. It's built on talent, skill, speed. Guys like Cale Makar, although Cale Makar is a monster, don't get me wrong, but guys like Quinn Hughes in Vancouver, there's a good example, or Rasmus Sandin, who's 5'10", but he's a smaller dude, but he can hit, he can shoot, and he's a great defender. And I think that the point I'm making here is if you have a different opinion, you will be able to break through your biases that you hold and you don't even see. And so I think you need people from all walks of life, opinions from whether it be the female hockey perspective or in Shanahan's case, he's got an old school perspective, and then you've got Kyle who maybe has a bit of an analytics perspective. So I like what they're doing with the front office. It's amazing, and I hope that the Toronto Maple Leafs continue to set great examples in the hockey community, although there are other hockey teams doing great things as well when it comes to diversity, whether it be hiring women or BIPOC people or just thinking differently. I just love to see it. I love to see new ideas. I don't like to see the old ideas. I want to see the new ideas. I want to see the kid from wherever they're from. I don't care where you're from. Can you put the puck in the net, and is it exciting? And I think it's going to be exciting watching the new crop of talent in this draft move forward. And it's once again another exciting time to be a fan of hockey. There is so much speed and skill, and that's what makes it so much fun. Party time. Number 5. Now, as you guys know, I'm a huge Seattle Seahawks fan. I am a fan of the Legion of Boom. I am a bandwagoner. I am not an expert on NFL football, and I'm going to have some people who are experts on NFL football on the podcast in the next few weeks as we gear up for week 1. But the big trade went down today. Baker Mayfield went to the Carolina Panthers, and the rumor was that he was going to Seattle for weeks and weeks and weeks, and he has been traded to the Carolina Panthers today. So I guess what that means for Seattle is that they're going to run Geno and they're going to run Drew Lock, and that's what they're going to run, and they're fine with it. They don't care about Baker Mayfield, and Baker Mayfield, I think, is a buy low situation for Carolina. I think he's probably had a bad situation in Cleveland and needs a change of scenery. I don't know enough about Baker to know whether he's going to succeed or fail, but what I will say is that when you have high expectations going first in the draft, whether it be the NFL, the MLB, the NBA, or the NHL, I think what ends up happening is sometimes there's a lot of pressure and it doesn't end up working out. And in the NFL, it seems like there's more flameouts than there are in any other sport. But that being said, I'd like to get into the weeds on NFL football down the road here on the podcast, so we'll talk further. That's the 5 things for this week. So we got Ron McLean, we got the Blue Jay slump ending, the draft, Haley Wick gets hired, and we're excited for her. And then Baker Mayfield goes to Carolina for, I think, a 5th-round pick that could turn into a 4th. So it's conditional. So that's 5 things. I mean, there's a lot more than 5 that happened this week, and there's a hell of a lot of more than 5 that's coming up this next week. But that's 5 for this week, and then that's my opinion on it. Next up, as you folks know, I'm from the West Coast. I live out near Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada, but I am a Ontario boy. I was raised in Northern Ontario, and on Twitter I met a very good friend, Doug Doucette, and he and I have been communicating for a year or so more, talking music, talking hockey. He's been helping me with songwriting, and we talk about all kinds of different things, creative projects we're involved in. But he's a huge, passionate baseball fan, which I am also a baseball fan, but not to the same level as he is. And I'm going to talk to him now on the podcast. I did an interview with him, and I'm going to play it for you. And I'm really happy to introduce him. We're going to talk about the trade deadline for the Blue Jays, what could happen, and we're going to talk about a little bit about the Leafs. And so here we go. Doug Doucette. First of all, thank you for joining me on my podcast. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
The listeners don't know this, but we have a shared geographical sort of territory upbringing. I live out on the West Coast, but I grew up on the Manitoulin, as you know. What's it like up in the Great White North?
Right now, it's nice. The summers are always fantastic here. I was actually on Manitoulin Island this weekend for a family reunion.
Oh wow, whereabouts?
In Manitowoc, like right in the bay.
Dude, you could have thrown a rock at my dad.
Yeah, probably.
He's if you go down. Now, every single listener that's listening to this doesn't want to know about the Manitoulin, but it is a hidden gem. Honestly, I believe that. I do believe that.
It absolutely is.
Maybe I'm biased, but if you drive from Manitowoc, you take this road. There's this little road. I don't know what it's called, but you go to basically to South Bay, and my dad's on the lake.
Cool.
So yeah,
beautiful. Absolutely beautiful.
I've wanted to plan, and I told you that I was going to come out had the Leafs gone deeper into the playoffs, just to be in amongst you folk in person. That would have been such a great experience. But I do think if the Leafs do win the cup, which may someday happen, hopefully in my lifetime, but in your lifetime, but I would love to have a quote Leafs fan friendship retreat up at my dad's cottage.
That would be fantastic. And with the ferry, it's really not even that bad of a trip.
4 or 5 hours from Toronto.
Yeah, Saturday night we drove all the way to Barrie. We played in a softball tournament out there, so we went from Manitowoc to Barrie in one shot, and it wasn't too bad.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
What now you play softball? Tell me about that.
Yeah, it's a rec sport that we take way too seriously and play pretty much every weekend all over the province.
Is it like the no-show?
It's probably a pretty good comparison, yeah.
Nice.
So my wife's team plays at a really high level. The boys are not quite there, but we got a good young team, so it's a lot of fun.
Do you guys swear at the refs and umps and stuff, and like Jersey people, like the no-show?
No, we're a classy bunch. So
that's awesome. Well, I brought you on because I think I've told you this, or maybe you already knew this about me, but when I lived in Ontario, the Leafs were good too, but the Jays were the top of the league. And so my expertise on baseball comes from a lens of the 90s, which is weird, but so I don't know the minutia of what's going on with the Jays other than lightly following from the David Price era to now. And so I don't know what the moves are that we have in the tank for the trade deadline. I'm assuming pitching is the big problem with injuries. What do you think on that? What are your thoughts on the Jays?
The bullpen is the real problem at the time, at right this moment. It's probably been the problem since the start of the season, and they've tried to put in little patchwork like Sergio Romo, and they just picked up Anthony Banda from Pittsburgh, which aren't long-term solutions. Sergio Romo was very good at one point in his life. He's got 3 World Series rings. He closed at least one of them out, maybe 2 of them. But these days he's 39 years old and he throws 90 miles an hour tops, and he's been getting the shit beat out of him for the last couple of years. So
is he like a leverage sort of eighth inning?
He was a very a high end closer in his day, but the last few years he's just kind of been a guy they've tried to find. He was in Tampa. They tried to find a spot for him. He had some okay stretches. He was in, I believe, Seattle to start this season, and it was just absolutely terrible. As bad as anybody had been in baseball out of the bullpen to the point that when he got released. So I don't know what they're trying to get out of him. It's probably not much. I think if they can get maybe 10, 12 appearances out of him before he starts to turn back into a pumpkin, then they can make a bigger move and bring in a more trustworthy arm.
Yeah, I think that you're probably just digging through the basement of the garbage bin right now. What's the secret? What's Pete Walker's secret sauce? Do you know what it is? Do you know what is his secret?
That is a loaded question for a drinking joke.
Yikes.
I think,
other than that, yeah.
I think that his communication is off the charts. That's the biggest thing with coaching is being able to articulate the things that you have in your head from being in the game for, in Pete Walker's case, 30 plus years, 35 years. And he had some success as a player as well. So he's speaking from experience as well. But in my experience with coaching, with me being a coach and coaches in my past, the biggest separator is just the ability to communicate the knowledge that you have and put it in a language that the players can understand. And I think that's what he does as well as anybody in baseball.
It seems like, and please correct me if I'm wrong, he's able to he's so respected that he can tell a pitcher like a Robbie Ray, you can say, listen, you've been trying this curveball that hasn't worked in the pros. Why don't you just focus on your fastball? He's kind of like Absolutely. That guy, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's very fair. And that's probably a personality thing, right? That, like an alpha dog kind of mentality where if somebody says something with enough confidence, anybody will believe them.
He's got the Cy Youngs to back it up, though. So, I mean, Robbie Ray now looks like made Pete Walker look like a guru, right? Kind of like Tretiak or one of those kind of goalie coaches in years gone by.
And it wasn't only Robbie Ray. Ross Stripling has been an absolutely different pitcher since he's come from LA. There's a fairly long list of guys who have harnessed the natural raw ability that they had elsewhere and weren't able to put it together, and then came to Toronto and everything seemed to fall in line. So I think a lot of it is Twitter lore at this point. But there's obviously there's fire, it's not just a bunch of smoke.
The difference between each pro league and pro coach is like splitting hairs, like just minor details that
absolutely.
And so I do wonder, and you would know this more than me, is because the Jays are kind of like that small market, big market team. They're not the Yanks or the Red Sox that can sort of blow through the luxury tax to get anybody they want. I think they kind of have to play a bit of Moneyball, and they have to convince players to come play in Canada, with two things which can be difficult. but I do think that they have to find and unearth players like Ryu, who I do feel that was kind of like that kind of player who they're like, well, we see something here that we can elevate a bit. Not that he had the greatest seasons with Toronto, but maybe the Katichi, whatever the pitcher they got this year, he's like a classic Pete Walker sort of. We'll bring him in, and we know what we can do with him.
Absolutely. Guys that struggle with consistency. In Ryu's case, it was they thought they could manage his workload and keep him on the field, which they did for the most part until this injury. Ryu was phenomenal in LA, but missed large chunks of seasons. So when they brought him in, it was like a systematic plan to, only let him go 5 innings or 6 innings or skip, give him 6 days rest when they could. And for the most part, it worked out pretty well. The season in 2020, the COVID shortened season, he was like a real turning point in the rotation. They had Matt Shoemaker, who couldn't stay on the field. They were using relievers. They had prospects that were coming up too early and they weren't ready to go. And Ryu really solidified the rotation. And I know it was expanded playoffs, but I ended up getting them into the playoffs. And I think that people are going to look at his tenure in Toronto as, a bit of a failure, but I don't think it was at all. And he's planning on making it back by the end of next season. So, it might not be done yet. But I do agree that they do go and look for guys that maybe don't have, 10, 12 teams interested in them that they have to compete with.
I wonder if Toronto is better at finding rare gems than developing pitchers. And I don't mean that, I'm an outsider saying that. And I know that the Jays have arguably one of the greatest pitchers of all time to play for them, a number of them. But I wonder if, although Manoah, you've shown your love for Manoah all over Twitter. Every team is going to strike lightning eventually. And do you think that they're better at finding reclamation projects than they are developing pitchers, or am I making that up?
The old adage in baseball is to draft and develop position players and trade for pitching,
right?
Because it costs so much money to develop pitching. Guys are in the minors for 5, 6, 7 years. They come up and they, hitters make adjustments and then they have to go back down and they have, it's a big pain when you could just go and trade for a guy who's 28 years old and somebody else invested all the money into it. Or you could spend all your money on free agency pitching options and stuff like that. So there's 13 relievers on every single team that were starting pitchers that thought they were going to make the major leagues as a starting pitcher, and they're pitching 1 inning every 3 nights in the bullpen. So you're
basically describing goaltenders. Like developing a goaltender is the hardest thing to do in hockey.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's a lot more jobs on the mound in baseball. So
exactly. And that's another issue to begin. And we're not going to get deep into the weeds on hockey, but to compare and contrast, I do think that baseball has a higher pool of talent. And what you just described, actually, I have a friend whose nephew is at the University of Oregon. And what you just described is playing 1 inning every 3 days, maybe, or game or whatever. He's going through that, but he's going to be a stud. He's 6'3" lefty, and he's only 20. But it's going to take forever to get. If he does make it to the bigs, it's a marathon.
Absolutely.
So, but yeah, what were your thoughts on the first base coach for the Toronto Blue Jays? The news that came out the other day.
Absolutely awful. Obviously a tragedy, but it's unfortunate that it unfolded on TV. Obviously they couldn't just let him finish the game. They had to tell him when they had the news. So, and that's Mark Budzinski. He was a career minor leaguer, has 1,200 games in the minors or something like that. He's been in baseball for 25 years. And the only way you stay in baseball that long is either if you have continued success or if you're an incredible person. So obviously he's a very good person, a very good coach. And this is horrible. I know he was a father, it's tough to even talk about or think about. It's awful.
I thought Charlie. I mean, Charlie gets kind of dumped on as he doesn't seem to be great at pitching deployment. But you can comment on that after what I'm about to say. But what he does do well is he is probably the highest quality person I think I've seen in the Jays organization in a long time. Not that Gibby wasn't fantastic. By the way, Gibby was great. But I think the fact that Charlie left with Mark shows the quality of person he is.
Yeah, absolutely. And John Schneider, the bench coach, also same type of person, same type of personality. The social IQ and an emotional IQ on the Blue Jays dugout from the coaching staff is extremely high in general, I think, across the board. And that includes Mark Budzinski. They're all fantastic people. I think that's Ross Atkins went out of his way to surround the players with good people who had a lot of knowledge about the game as well. So obviously, my heart goes out to him. I don't know how you even deal with that.
It's a terrible story.
Absolutely.
It's horrible to hear about. And I think that some of the comments about them getting fired or something mid-game are brutal, but people are going to say what they're going to say. But my biggest takeaway is, like, it's easy to be a fan of a bigger fan of a coach or a team when you see the support. It's kind of like when Kyle ran down the stairs when John was on the ice, right, in the playoffs in round one. You see that and you're like, well, that's what I would want my GM to do, or my coach to do, or my friend to do, or I would want to be able to do. So it's easier to cheer for these people even more, and be passionate about the sport and the team and the success. Do you think what are your give me your 2 targets for the Jays? What's a crazy swing for the fences trade they could make at the deadline?
I think the biggest impact move that they'll look to make is to add a left-handed hitting outfielder and package him in with a reliever, a high leverage, high strikeout kind of, throws gas and misses bats kind of reliever. So like that probably puts you in the Andrew Benintendi conversation out of Kansas City, and they've got Scott Barlow's phenomenal relief pitcher. I think he's closing for them this year, and they have Josh Stolman, who's hurt right now, but also having a good season. Austin Meadows in Detroit is a good one, and they've got a fantastic bullpen right now. Joe Jimenez, Michael Fulmer, Andrew Chafin, who I've been a fan of since the winter. I really wanted the Jays to go out and get him. I know he's got a player option, but that could work out. And then Ian Happ in Chicago is another good one. He plays outfield, plays infield, switch hitter. And they've got David Robertson, who's having a resurgence this year, who's probably going to have a lot of suitors, but would be a good pickup.
Do the Jays have depth to pull those trades off?
I think so. They've got a lot of close to majors prospects like Samad Taylor and Otto Lopez and the guys that are starting to age out of the minors, and they'll need to get a look. And teams in that position that are already out of the playoffs before the All-Star break, that's what they're looking for, right? Is to strike lightning with a guy that maybe just hasn't got a chance yet. Those guys, and
a position the Jays are already deep at, like with shortstop.
Exactly, yeah. Like we saw with Rowdy Tellez getting moved last year to Milwaukee, there wasn't an opportunity for him here, and he's done okay there. I think his success gets blown up a little bit, but he's getting a chance to play every day, and he's making an impact on that team, and it's a good team. So it happens all the time where guys get a chance and they excel. And
there's more options, like baseball, because there's just it's a bigger team, and there's there's more opportunity for that's a great example. Rowdy, who I really liked, but it's an inconsistent hitter in Toronto, and then he gets moved and he's a little bit more consistent, but it's kind of the right move for the player at the time. Absolutely. They treated him really well, I thought, and he was actually said, I'm open to coming back to Toronto, which is interesting. So that's kind of nice. It'll be interesting to see. Do you think this is with the Yanks? Is the Yanks' success artificial? Are they just playing really bad teams more than anyone else, or are they're the real deal? And is Toronto's injuries going to hold them back? What do we go all in, kind of like 2015 with David Price, or do we say it's just kind of hold back a little bit, keep the best prospects, and wait till next year? What do you think? What would you do?
I think baseball, more than other sports, is just get in and
see what happens
and try and make it happen. Yeah. Especially with as good as Alek Manoah has been, if you're getting into a position where it's their best pitcher against your best pitcher, and we're going to see what happens, I feel like the Blue Jays are in a pretty good position that they can match up with Garrett Cole, and they can match up with, any of those guys. So the division is probably getting pretty out of hand. I don't think that anybody's going to catch the Yankees, even if they fall off a little bit, which they likely will. If you go back and you look at Cleveland from a few years ago when they broke the A's record for most consecutive wins in a season, teams go through these just unbelievable stretches and then they fall off. It happens all the time. Baseball is full of ebbs and flows. It's up and down all season long. It's an incredibly long season. So they've probably had a lot of luck. They've probably played extremely well in some cases, and it's all, just strung together, and good for them. They're almost definitely going to win the division, but with the expanded playoffs now, you can finish first or second and you get 2 kicks at it. So it's not just a one and done and you're out anymore. So I think that's what the live ball is, home field advantage in the first wild card game. And hopefully they win that and win the next one and then go play, probably the Yankees. It depends how Houston does down the stretch, and I don't think there's any reason why they wouldn't be able to beat the Yankees in a 5-game series.
In a one and done, I don't think the Yanks are thinking, or any team is thinking, oh, I want the Jays. I think the Jays in a one and done have a really, really amazing roster. It's when you get to the third pitcher, that's in a 7-game series where they're a little weak. Yeah. And the bullpen, but a one and done, I think they have a really strong team.
Absolutely.
Adding the depth, it's kind of, again, sorry to bring back the hockey analogy, it's kind of like the top heavy Leafs, right? A little bit. They have a great top 6, but then you wonder about their fourth line, left winger or whatever. But I think the Jays, this is an intriguing season, but I think injuries are what you said with the Yanks. I don't think that they had the level of injuries that you have to overcome, like
they've had some pitching injuries. Yeah. So it's 162 games. Everybody has injuries. So
yeah, managing that.
You just have to have, the next guy that's gonna step up. And if you don't have them, then you have to go and get them. So I think we'll see a lot of depth additions.
Is Pearson an option?
In theory, yes. In my opinion, no, not really. I think he has so many technical flaws that he's either going to just keep hurting himself, or he won't have success. He doesn't seem to commit the way that like if you follow Alek Manoah on Instagram or Facebook or whatever, you see videos of him in the gym working out, throwing every single day, all summer long. He shows up and you could see the results. He's on the field and you could see in game and how the difference that it's making. But Nate Pearson shows up and he's even more top heavy and still has these rail thin legs, and everybody wonders why he keeps getting hurt. I don't see it anymore.
So you think it's commitment or sort of?
I think that he's got by on 102 mile an hour fastball his whole life, and it's not working for him anymore. He's not gonna. You can't get by on just velocity for your whole career.
Strange comparison, but Aaron Sanchez for the Jays was kind of touted as a really high end pitcher, and then it never seemed to work out. I wondered if Pearson was kind of like him in the sense that
I think Dustin McGowan is probably a really good comparison.
Yeah.
A guy that got touched up when he got to the majors and then tried to make adjustments and kept getting hurt, couldn't stay on the field because of the adjustments, and it just never worked out. And I don't know that Nate Pearson has the other tools. I think that he has that fastball, and he can, his other pitches kind of play off that fastball every now and then, but ultimately I don't see where the continued success is going to come from unless he really commits to getting better on and off the field.
And in the minors, it's no secret I live in the Vancouver area. If you're a Canadians fan, you're obviously paying close attention to their youth because of how it's going to eventually impact the Jays. Is there anybody on the Canadians you would be rushing to Nat Bailey Stadium to see this summer?
Ricky Tiedemann right now is just unbelievable. He was a guy they drafted. It was maybe the third or fourth round, something like that. It wasn't super early. And he didn't have a big fastball. It was, I think, I remember the scouting reports to 91 or 92, but has a funky 3/4 arm slot delivery with really good breaking stuff, really good off speed. And then he showed up to camp this year throwing, topping on a 98. And now he started in Dunedin and Low A and just dominated. He's in Vancouver right now, dominating. So I think there might be a situation where he gets promoted to New Hampshire as a 19-year-old, which is absolutely crazy for a pitcher, and set up as like a bulk guy out of the bullpen. So maybe not this year, but certainly next year you can possibly see him as a guy that has a chance at cracking the Blue Jays bullpen.
That's great. I'm curious to watch that. I'll have to be paying closer attention to him and the Canadians. They're short. What's their league called? The short season league. The single A. They're
in high A. It's called now. So there's low A, which is high A used to be in Dunedin. Now low A is in Dunedin, and high A moved to Vancouver. So they've been promoted leagues. They were short season rookie ball a couple years ago, but now they're the high A team. So I think it's just high A West, Northwest, or something like that. They took all the names out of them.
Yeah, they were. They kind of fell down in the sort of hierarchy of the minors a couple years ago, especially with COVID-19 with the shutdown.
Yeah,
and that's good to hear they come back. They're actually. People out here love to go see the Canadians. They go insane for them. It's always full. It's a really fun experience. The hot dogs are fun. They have stuff for the kids. It's a cool little stadium too. It's in a really nice area of Vancouver, just sort of in this it's called Mount Pleasant. So it's a really cool, actually in Vancouver, which is nice. You can get to it with transit really easily. So it's a fun afternoon thing to do for hipsters. Because it is a lot of hipsters to go to this stuff, but it's like kitschy, sort of fun, random thing to do. And I've been a bunch of times, and it's a blast. So I'll have to keep an eye on that. What about the Leafs? Let's pivot. What do you think is going to happen in net for Toronto?
Oh boy,
is this a can of worms we don't want to get into now? Should we save this for later?
I just don't think there's a right answer.
Is there a wrong answer? Is Marc-Andre Fleury the wrong answer?
I don't think so, no.
Is Peter Mrazek the wrong answer?
I don't think that's true either. I think Peter Mrazek's a good goalie. I think he had the worst year of his career, and he can't possibly be that bad again.
Does Kyle Dubas think this way? We'll try him again because law of averages says he's going to rebound.
I honestly think so. I think if you run him out there the same way you planned to run him out last year, and you get something out of him, then he at least becomes movable. If you bring in a better option, like re-signing Jack or signing Marc-Andre Fleury or Ville Husso or whoever the case is.
You're right. His value is really low right now. If he doesn't play any games, his value is super
negative.
Low.
His value is negative.
I don't think Dubas is the kind of guy that would trade a negative valued asset, especially making 3.8. He makes enough that you're like, well, maybe we should get 20 games out of him and see what happens. You're right. I do have a sneaky suspicion that's probably what'll happen, but a lot of the talking heads, specifically about Mrazek, I think they're going to buy him out, but I don't know. That's a weird one. It's a weird one for me. I don't know. Goal is weird because it all indications are they're going to just re-sign Campbell, and they've already got a deal for him. But I don't know. There's a bit of like smoke and mirrors out there with, how the media is played by the agents.
Absolutely.
So I think some of the noise is generated by other teams trying to make it harder. I do think that the Dubas and the Leafs organization did something that I've never seen them do, which is drive up a player's value. Ben Sherratt, I've never seen the Leafs do it, but they did. I think they did it with him.
It has to be one of the worst trade deadline trades in recent memory
ever. Yeah, and I think that the frenzy around that player, not that he's that bad. Like, he's bad, but he's not a 1-2. He's like a 5-6, right? But I think that the frenzy around him specifically was driven by the media and Toronto leaking interest, I think, because they were thinking, if we have to go up against Florida, let's put Ben Sherratt on that team so that we have a better chance or whatever. But
not only that, but Florida is likely going to be a contender in our division. That seems to be the three teams in our division that we'll have to deal with for the next couple of years, right?
Yeah, it's going to be Tampa.
Boston kind of falling off. So
I think Ottawa's going to, it's interesting you bring that up. I think Ottawa is going to be surprising. Like, I've said this a couple years in a row now. I used to hate the Sens like every Leaf fan, but got a really good friend who's a huge Sens fan who I'm going to have on the pod, and we'll talk about the Sens. But I have a soft spot for them with DJ Smith and Connor Brown, and I like Tim Stützle, but I think they're going to be good in the next year or two, and I think they're going to surprise people. I think Washington may eventually fall off too. Pittsburgh's going to fall off. Brian Burke is the president. They're going to fall off. And losing Malkin, how do they think they could be good without Malkin? I don't know. But no, you're right. Toronto playing the sort of art of war against some of these interdivisional teams is smart. It's just smart gamesmanship, right?
Absolutely. And it's been done to us, I'm sure, more
so many times
than we've done to anybody else.
Mitch Marner. I mean, Mitch Marner's contract was all
absolutely.
Darren Ferris using Darren Dreger. I mean, it's no secret. That's how it was done for ages out in Toronto. But do you think who do you have picked at 25?
I haven't looked into it as much as I probably should. So I don't really. There's not anybody that I would be super disappointed if he fell to them and they didn't.
I'd like to
get him.
I'm like you. I haven't really researched enough. I think that, I mean, Rodion Amirov was a fantastic hockey player, and he may still be a fantastic hockey player after he recovers from his illness. But I think that he was a bit of a Hail Mary instead of going with a safer Schneider pick, who looks fantastic for the Rangers. Let's be honest.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I don't beat Kyle up on that decision because it was a high risk decision, and having a high end winger prospect is fantastic, and you should try for that. But I do think that I'd like to see Kyle just for once in the first round go with a really safe, obvious pick. And Rutger McGrody, I don't know if he is the guy, but he's a big Canadian OHLer, so maybe he's the guy. But
there's talk of Brad Lambert falling down that far too, which would be pretty crazy because 2 years as a 16-year-old or whatever, when he first showed up at the World Juniors, he was really talked about as a guy that could go top 3 or 4 in this draft. So I don't really know. I know there was some question about his
skating,
personality and stuff. And he's a big skilled kid too. So, that'd be kind of fun if he fell that far. But, usually when guys fall like that, there's a reason.
Yeah. Although Tim Lilgren fell.
Yep.
Sandine kind of fell a little bit too. So,
and we do like the Scandinavians. So I think that's a guy they're probably looking at. And he seems to be ranked all over the first round. So it's not out of the realm of possibility that he drops that far. So
this is going to be one of the, I mean, we at least fans say this every year, but this year specifically, the UFA and draft, I think this is going to be one of the most intriguing weeks in a couple of years. Last year, I think everybody was a little disappointed we didn't go after a bigger fish, but now David Kampf looks genius, right? And
absolutely, yeah.
I think that this is a year where the roster needs to be reshaped, but who knows what the genius minds of Shani and Kyle are thinking, because they do need something to get goals in high leverage situations, and
they need guys that can finish.
Yeah,
they get chances more than anybody. They just need to get people that put them in.
Yeah, certainly a third line that can chip in more than 2 goals, and none of them were not empty netters. But moving on from Mikheyev is the right decision, and I think they need playing some of these guys in the Marlies. You got to see what you have. Let them fail, right? Let them succeed or fail. Even if it's Nick Robertson, another guy I think that he needs to fail or succeed. So they need to play him, and he needs to play. They need these kids. Let the kids play. Doug, it's been great having you on the podcast.
Oh, thanks for having me. Nice chatting with you.
Yeah, I'll be thinking about you next time I talk to my dad on the Manitoulin. Hopefully, we can have that rager with all of us getting together. Maybe even next. Fingers crossed in June next year, or July. I don't know. That'd be great. A Stanley Cup party. You'll be there. I'll be there. We'll invite everyone. Dude, you're awesome. Thanks for chatting.